BMW is a brand known for making all sorts of cars that we all probably see every day, but also a lot of popular sports cars. However, there are many more vehicles from them that stand out from the usual standard that many expect. So let's sit down, grab a snack, and in this video I'll present a few such BMWs. Starting off with the BMW i8, which looks nice and expensive, but it's often called out for having an engine that shouldn't be in a car like it. But, well, let's start from the beginning. The first sight of this car was presented in 2009 during the Frankfurt Motor Show, where they presented a concept car called the BMW Vision Efficient Dynamics. Its goal was to combine a performance expected from the BMW M lineup and achieve a CO2 emission and fuel consumption similar to that of a smaller car. So, starting off with the performance, it was a plug-in hybrid with a 1.5 turbo diesel inline-3 paired with a 6-speed DCT transmission and two electric motors that by themselves produced 139 horsepower. The entire drivetrain made 356 horsepower and a quite impressive 800 Nm of torque to all four wheels, with a weight of 1,395 kilograms. Also, it did 0 to 100 km an hour in 4.8 seconds with a top speed of 250 km an hour. According to BMW, the car had an average fuel consumption of 3.76 liters per 100 kilometers and a carbon dioxide emission rating of 99 grams per kilometer. So I think it can be said that the car succeeded in its goal. Moving on to the year 2011, when during once again the Frankfurt Motor Show, BMW presented the next version of the previously mentioned car, this time named the BMW i8 Concept. One of the things that was different was the engine, which was still an inline-3 of the same volume, but now it was a petrol engine instead of a diesel one. This helped them slightly improve performance and fuel economy. Overall, construction-wise, this car was designed in a way closer to a production car than previously, and this concept car was featured in the movie Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. 1 year later, in 2012, during the Auto China show in Beijing, the presentation of the BMW i8 Concept Spider took place. Drivetrain-wise, it was the same car as the one from 2011, but except for removing the roof, they also got rid of the rear seats. Thanks to that, they also managed to make the interior more spacious. Once again, a year later, BMW showed an almost ready for production BMW i8 Coupe prototype, which of course construction-wise was mostly based on the 2011 i8 concept. It was also available to be tested by car testers and was very similar to the production version, which was unveiled later that same year at the 2013 International Motor Show Germany in Frankfurt. The production variant, as we all know, is just called the BMW i8, and its first units started rolling off the BMW Leipzig factory production lines in April 2014. So let's talk about its specifications. As a hybrid, it had two motors, one mid-rear placed petrol 1.5 liter inline-3 producing 231 horsepower and 320 Nm of torque through a 6-speed automatic transmission to the rear wheels, and the other electric motor placed in the front, which produced 131 horsepower and 250 Nm of torque going through a 2-speed transmission. On the electric part of the drivetrain, it achieved a range of 37 km and a top speed of 120 km an hour. Its combined power output was 362 horsepower and 570 Nm of torque, but even though it had a truly advanced drivetrain, it only weighed a respectable 1,490 kilograms. Its design also made it impressively aerodynamic, thanks to which it achieved a fuel consumption of just 2.5 liters per 100 kilometers, while also being able to do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.4 seconds and reach an electronically limited top speed of 250 kilometers an hour. It also had a very low CO2 emissions for its time, and they went for about this much in 2014, which adjusted for inflation is about this much today. This is the BMW 5 Series E60 generation. When debuting in 2003, it got quite a lot of attention for a design that really stood out from its previous generations, with many at the time saying it is too angular, doesn't look like a proper BMW, and that the 5 Series got ruined. But I think the design with time became acceptable, and people don't talk too badly about it anymore, which is probably because BMW got better at making their new designs, let's just say, more controversial. But back to the car, more specifically to its variant that is one of the craziest M cars ever made. The M5 variant of the 5 Series was introduced in 2005, 2 years after the base 5 Series E60, and it's most famous for its absurd drivetrain. It was powered by a naturally aspirated 5-liter V10 that revved above 8,000 RPM and produced 507 horsepower and 520 Nm of torque. That engine is often given the title of the best sounding V10. But this car is also known for its most common transmission, which is known for its often inexpensive breakdowns. But let's talk about what is exactly this transmission I'm talking about. The said transmission is a 7-speed SMG, not to be mistaken with a DCT dual-clutch transmission. To be more specific, SMG is a single-clutch automated manual transmission, so it's built similarly to a normal manual gearbox, but its clutch and gear changes are operated by the car's computer and hydraulic pumps. It was able to accelerate from 0 to 100 km an hour in about 4.7 seconds and had an electronically limited top speed of 250 km an hour. But if you paid extra for the M Drivers package, the top speed limiter was moved to 305 km an hour, and with the speed limiter completely removed via independent tuning, it was able to achieve speeds often exceeding 330 km an hour. Also, starting from the 2007 model year, a 6-speed manual version began being available, but only in the North American market. That same year, the touring version of the M5 began its sales only in Europe, and since the manual transmission was only available in North America, none of the factory E61 M5 Tourings were fitted with said manual gearbox, but due to low demand on this car, they only made 1025, and that low sales number kinda traumatized BMW for making touring M cars for the next 12 years, until they made the G81 M3 Touring, which till now sold way better. In total, they made 20,589 units, with the biggest market for these cars being the United States, where they sold 8,800 units alone, and also the M5 cost about this much new in 2005, which is about this much in today's money. Now, let's talk about something less modern, but still sporty and quite quirky. This is the BMW Z1, which was the first car from BMW Z series, which exists till this day. This specific car started off in 1985, when BMW set up a division called BMW Technik GmbH, which was meant to develop some new concept and technologies that could help in creating new cars in the future. And one of the cars they created, and their only creation that made it into production, was this car, developed from 1986 with a deliberate focus on experimentation. The first prototype was produced and publicly shown in 1986, and a year later, in August 1987, during the Frankfurt Motor Show, a production version was presented, with the actual production starting in October of 1988. So let's talk about what this car had to offer, starting off with the less its obvious unusualities, like the fact that it had removable body panels made out of thermoplastic instead of the usual welded steel ones, and thanks to that and less notable weight reducing factors, the car's final weight was brought to just 1,250 kilograms. And also, the weird quirk is most famously known for are its doors, which closed and opened by just sliding up and down, and it was possible for this car to be driven with the doors open, but besides that, thanks to the engine placement behind the front axle known as the mid-front placement, it had a weight distribution of 50-50. It was also designed with a heavy focus on aerodynamics. For example, a plastic undertray was used to improve the airflow under the car. But also, let's talk about its drivetrain. It used a 2.5-liter inline-six, producing 168 horsepower and 220 Nm of torque, going through a 5-speed manual transmission that was also used in the BMW E30 325i, sending power to the rear wheels. And also, this drivetrain and the previously mentioned aspects allowed this car to accelerate from 0 to 100 km an hour in 7.9 seconds and reach a top speed of 225 km an hour. But the production only lasted from March 1989 to June 1991, with 8,000 units made, all at the BMW's factory in Munich, Germany, and only in the left-hand drive specification. The majority, 6,443 to be specific, were sold in BMW's native market, in Germany, and the rest were sold mostly in Italy, with a few models making it to other European countries. And new, they were priced at about this much, which is about this much in today's money. Now, let's talk about a car that would popularly be considered a sleeper, which is a car that has high performance while having an unassuming exterior. But for more context, let's start from the basics. This is the BMW X5 E53, which is a mid-size luxury crossover SUV produced from 1999 to 2006, and it was the first generation BMW X5. As you can tell, this car on its own is impressively uninteresting. But this is a completely different car. To be more specific, this is a 1999 BMW V12 LMR, and as the name suggests, it used a 6-liter naturally aspirated V12 which was producing about 580 horsepower and fitting all the Le Mans racing regulations. Using this car, BMW won the 24-hour of Le Mans race. So, to celebrate, BMW decided to do something that was quite extraordinary for the time, and that something was their plan to use unregulated version of the engine from the race car that won the Le Mans in the previously mentioned BMW X5, and so they created this, and this is the BMW X5 Le Mans, or just LM. It was powered by a naturally aspirated V12 producing over 700 horsepower and 720 Nm of torque through a 6-speed manual transmission to all 4 wheels, and while still weighing over 2 tons, it still achieved a 0 to 100 time of 4.7 seconds. Of course, it also had rear suspension, brakes, a roll cage, 4 sporty bucket seats, and no airbags, but its interior wasn't completely race focused and still had most of its comforts and functionalities needed for normal and comfortable commuting. Also, its top speed isn't exactly known, but we'll get to that later, because BMW decided to bring this car to the famous German racetrack known as the Green Hell, and that track is of course the Nürburgring, where the car on the the main straight of the track reached a speed of 311 km an hour and achieved an unimaginable lap time for an SUV in the year 2000 of 7 minutes and 49 seconds, with a race driver Hans Joachim behind the wheel. That record in the SUV category held its place for the next 90 years, when it was finally beaten by the Audi RS-Q8 in 2019, with a time better by around 7 seconds. But even though BMW only made one X5LM, thanks to its impressive motorsport achievements, it opened a wider view on performance SUVs and showed that such an idea might actually work. Moving on, let's talk about a car that by many is considered the only production supercar made by BMW. But starting from the beginning, in the late 1970s, the motorsport division of BMW decided to build a mid-engine race car, and the guy who led the car's development strictly insisted on the mid-engine layout, so as to give this car an advantage in racing. But first, they needed to produce at least 400 production cars to homologate in Group 5 racing, mostly with a goal to compete with Porsche. And since they had strict time limits to design the car, to speed up the process they partnered with Lamborghini, which was supposed to improve its chassis, assemble prototypes, and manufacture said 400 cars. But due to the oil crisis and global recession of the 1970s, Lamborghini as a company faced a lot of financial issues, which led the founder to sell his remaining shares, and not long after Lamborghini declared bankruptcy. Anyway, due to Lamborghini quitting the project, BMW was left by themselves to develop and assemble all the cars. But two former Lamborghini engineers, after creating their own company called Italian Engineering, offered to finish the car's overall engineering, and the fiberglass body of this car, with a huge inspiration from a BMW concept car from 1972, was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, who's known for designing many iconic cars, like this one, which I talked about in this video, you should check out. Anyway, this car's production began in 1978 and lasted till 1981, with a total of 453 units made, 53 of which were for racing-related purposes. The body and interior were put together in Italy, and the drivetrain with everything else in Munich, Germany, from where they were also sent to customers. So first, let's talk about what the production spec M1 had to offer. It weighed 300 kilograms and was powered by a naturally aspirated 3.5-liter inline-six that at 5000 rpm produced 330 Nm of torque, and at its red line of 6500 rpm produced a peak power of 273 horsepower through a 5-speed manual transmission to the rear wheels, which allowed it to go from 0 to 100 km an hour in 5.6 seconds and reach a top speed of about 262 km an hour. Thanks to the mid-engine layout, it had a great weight distribution, which paired with the double wishbone suspension gave this car very impressive handling and stability for its time. On the inside, it offered mostly basic features, with some parts shared from the other BMW models, and only left-hand drive variants were available. But let's talk about the racing this car was built for, starting off with BMW's own racing series, the BMW M1 Pro Car Championship, which ran in 1979 and in 1980. BMW used their Group 4 spec M1s, which were lighter and much more powerful, and racing drivers from Formula 1 based on their performance were automatically chosen to get an entry in the Pro Car events. Those F1 drivers raced each other in pretty much the same cars. The 1979 series was won by Austrian driver Niki Lauda, and the 1980 series was won by Brazilian Nelson Piquet. BMW, of course, had their purpose in creating this series, with the idea proposed by
Jochen Nerpasch,
who also led the M1 development, for a very simple reason. For the BMW M1 to race Porsche in Group 5, they first needed to make 400 road-going cars to homologate in Group 4, from which they could then use a tuned version to homologate to Group 5. Since that was an expensive process and production already had delays, the series helped justify the M1's purpose, keep it relevant, and promote it globally. The series succeeded in its goal, and today it is one of the most famous parts of the M1's racing history. Besides that, this car eventually made it to Group 4, where it didn't achieve anything impressive, but thanks to that they were finally able to homologate it into Group 5 using their Group 5 turbocharged variant, since the boost pressure often changed, sometimes reaching 1.5 bars. The engine specs aren't very exact, but from what is known, it made from 850 up to 1000 horsepower and more than 800 Nm of torque, while weighing barely over a ton. Even though those specs are insane, BMW wasn't able to beat Porsche in Group 5 racing, but this car still meant a lot. It was the first M car, the first mid-engine BMW, and it was a race car where many famous drivers competed with their skill rather than their cars. Due to it being so rare and good looking, it became really famous and expensive, now costing upwards of 500,000 euros, with well-preserved or rare examples fetching over 900,000 euros. And so with that, we've made it to the end of the video. Thanks for watching all the way through. I also highly recommend you check out this video you see on your screen right now, and hopefully see you in the next one.